Win Forever is a great concept to get your arms wrapped around, especially when things aren't going your way. If you have a win forever mentality, one of the fruits of that philosophy is that you're really working on something that's long lasting, that has a patience to it, an investment, more like an internal outlook. And so the idea of win forever in trying to establish patterns and habits and goals so that you always win or you have a long lasting system of success. Well, what that does is it focuses on end results and like the big picture rather than the little steps, because quite often there are going to be a lot of little trials. There's going to be a lot of obstacles. There's going to be a lot of rejection. I think of salespeople all the time. I think of a typical, let's say, Monday call day, right? Where you're calling prospects, you're cold calling, you're calling people that don't know you're calling, that don't want you to call. And so very typically, you're making 100, 200 phone calls, and most of those calls, you're just not reaching the right person. And, let's say if only, 10% of the people you reach are actual decision makers, well, by definition, that means out of 100 calls, 90 are flops. But they're not really flops. I mean, you really didn't reach people. You're essentially watering the ground and just, waiting for the seed to grow. But if you understand, hey, look, it takes 100 calls, it takes 200 calls to get my 5, to get my 10 appointments, well, then you understand the bigger picture. You understand the forever mentality, kind of like a farmer, right? Who plants, who waters, who cultivates, and then has to wait for his harvest. And so in a win forever mentality, a couple things happen. One is hopefully you don't get too discouraged when you have losses. And two, you don't become overconfident when you have some wins, because guess what? You have to do it again. Win forever is a philosophy that Pete Carroll came up with. And Pete Carroll, the famous former football coach for the USC Trojans, who brought them back to prominent history, and then also in the NFL, the Seattle Seahawks head football coach. And Pete Carroll's going down as one of the all-time greatest coaches in history, having won national championship in college level and Super Bowl at the pro level. I believe only two coaches have ever done that, and so it's pretty impressive. But one of the things that struck me when Pete Carroll was coaching the USC Trojans, when he came and he announced, his plan and his vision, one of the things that he reminded USC Trojan fans of was our love and our passion for Rose Bowls. Now, traditionally, the Rose Bowl is considered the best bowl game of college football. It's the longest lasting traditional bowl game. It really brought together the West and the Midwest, and so the Pac-10 champion and the Big Ten champion traditionally face off in Pasadena, California, on New Year's Day. Now, things have changed over the last couple of years, some structure, but that's the general concept of the Rose Bowl. And USC has won the Rose Bowl more than anybody. I believe they've won it something like 22 or 24 times, and the second most victories is like 7. So they've completely dominated the bowl game. But here's the problem with being a USC football fan. USC has had a phenomenal history of success. They've won national championships with many different coaches, with many different teams. And so as a USC football fan, it's almost like this. It's almost all or nothing. All or nothing. And so the mentality of being a USC football fan is that, well, not just win forever, but you've got to win everything forever. You have to win the championship every single year. And the reality is, well, that's just nonsense. It's silly. I mean, you can't win the national championship. You can't win, number one salesperson of the year. You can't, be number one every single time. And so you have to have other small victories for USC. In order to win a national championship, it's probably going to mean that you're going to need to win the Rose Bowl. In order to go to the Rose Bowl, you're going to have to win the Pac-10 or the Pac-12 championship. And in order to win the Pac-12 championship, you're probably going to need somewhere around 10 wins. And so those are all different benchmarks. And so there's different levels of success. The Heisman Trophy, for instance, is probably the most prestigious award given in any sport, and that's given to the College Football Player of the Year. And so USC has won many Heisman trophies as well. All that to say, there's a lot of different ways to win. There's a lot of ways to win, and what Pete Carroll says is, look, at the end of the day, there is no finish line. We have a win forever mentality because there is no finish line until we die. And so, you know what, I as an owner, as a earner, I need to figure out a way to make a living. I need to figure out a way to provide for my family forever, because there is no finish line. And so whether that means, making a lot of money in a short period of time and then save it, or have good investments, or be invested in business forever, whatever way it suits you best, there just isn't any finish line. Another part of the win forever mentality is okay. So I've talked about USC football, and obviously there's a lot of tradition at USC. So organizations need to develop a culture. They need to develop a way. And so, your mission, your vision, your purpose, that kind of defines your way. It defines your core values, and it clarifies your strategic priorities. You need to know your why. And so, that was one of the first things I established when I became, the head of Rainer Christian Schools, was I need to establish, well, who are we? What is the Mustang Way? And so I was able to lay out the 5 F's of the Mustang Way, so that at all times in everything that we did, we knew what our way was, so that we stay on a path to win forever, because there's no finish line. I got the Mustang Way drawing from the Oriole Way, which is a famous baseball team. And in the Oriole Way, it was, look, that they had a way of doing things that started from their rookie leagues, their minor leagues, all the way up to the major leagues. And so they were consistently teaching, coaching, training to their players to do it the same way at all levels. My father was a Little League baseball coach for 12 years before I ever played. And in those 12 years, my dad won 10 championships. And so there was an IGO, it stood for Independent Garage Owners. That was our sponsor. And IGO, we practiced perfect. We practiced longer. We practiced during the weekdays with special practices like batting practices and pitching practices. And this was for 10, 11, 12-year-olds in baseball. And so there was a way that IGO went about doing things. And like I said, why do we do this? Well, it's kind of like in Braveheart. In Braveheart, William Wallace says, hey, what we do now echoes for eternity. It does echo for eternity. I'm trying to establish a legacy. I'm trying to establish a legacy for my family, for my children, not just, financially to create something sustainable, but for me, spiritually, to make sure that my family has a spiritual foundation in Christianity. Again, the things that we do today, you know what? It's not just for 1 month. It's not just for 1 year. My parenting never ends. It didn't end when they were, 8 years old, 18 years old, and now I'm getting children that are getting to the 28 years old, and I can see now that my parenting will never end. And so the takeaway for Win Forever is, you know what? You got to be fully vested. We're investing in something that is planting the seeds like a farmer that's going to last forever, well beyond our time here. We're going to have losses, but one loss doesn't matter. One lost account doesn't matter. One bad business deal doesn't matter. You know what? We keep fighting. We keep coming back. Failure is an option because in our drive and in our pursuit for our happiness and for our success comes from an attitude that is win forever.